on this guy, we should see him change. And what he is displaying is the distance between where he is and the top of the water, right? And so we're down in the 18s.
Dr. Bruce,
Yeah.
you're talking about the yellow sensor, the one with the yellow cable? That's what
Yes, yes, it happens to be that sensor. Now there's another sensor behind it I'm still trying to get wired up, and hopefully by the end of today I'll have the color sensor finally wired up. I apologize, I keep not getting around to that. The other one is also an ultrasonic sensor. The difference is that one has a set point. And so I hope this is the case. I need to read a little more. But hopefully, because there's a input on it called set. And so logically what we should be able to do, and what I don't know is if we need software to do this, special software, if it's, it can be done directly in the unit. You set something of a known value. So you put some wood blocks or something under it so that it has a height. You pulse the set input on the sensor, so it'd be an output from the PLC that sets it, and you take it away, and then when you bring something up to the right height, when you add enough water, what happens is you'll hit that set point eventually, right? And then it turns on the output. And so it's a digital output, but it's an analog, it's functionally an analog system, right? Not originally what I wanted to buy, but I screwed up when I bought it, and we ordered the wrong part number. And it was a 1 character difference. I was in a hurry, apparently. But, so we've got them, so that's what I plan to do. All right, so we started at 19 something, we're now down to 15, right? If we put enough water in there, it's not gonna go to 0, but it'll go to something. Probably.
So there's no unit for
70.
it, right? You just
It is, in this case, there is no unit, correct.
just log the temperature.
You read the documentation on the unit, which actually happens to be here. Its range is 30 to 300 millimeters. And so for the rest of the class, that's 1.18 to 11.8 inches. And so as long as you are more than 1.8 inches from the sensor and less than 11.9 inches away from it, it will give you an analog value in between there. The clear tube in the back of, by the pillar here with the can, this guy also has an ultrasonic sensor. And the reason the can has a stop where it is because that's the minimum distance that the sensor can read. So that one, anything closer than where that can is now, it won't read. I mean, it'll give you a value, but it means nothing. You ask what time of the day it is, and it's answering Friday. The hell, that doesn't answer the question. It'll give you a 32,767 value or something like that, and you know that when you get that value, it's invalid because it can't functionally ever really be that. And so something you guys are going to have to figure out is what are the range readings for that ultrasonic sensor. And oh, by the way, keep in mind, now watch it. So I've got the recirculation going on, right? But Ishmael, if you watch these values, it's jumping all over the place. The surface is changing, right?
Right.
Because we're splashing. Once I turn that off, it should settle back down after
Right.
a few seconds or a minute. But one of those things you have to be aware of. At what state, especially for something like this, at what state am I reading it? And is the value I'm getting really indicative of what the level is? And I don't care what kind of sensor it is. We happen to be using ultrasonic. I could have a analog float sensor where it's detecting the position of the float moving up and down. I mean, if that thing's bobbing up and down, same problem. If we're using the other sensor, once I get wired in, that just says it's on or off as to whether or not I'm at my preset level. If I'm bouncing up and down, it's going to be going on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, and doesn't mean anything, right? When you deal with pressure sensors, especially for air pressure, generally speaking, unless you're very concerned about the air pressure, you're going to have a sensor that says, hey, I have to have a minimum air pressure. I don't care what it is above. I don't really care what it is below. I have to know, am I above that minimum air pressure? If the answer is yes, send an output, allow the system to run. If it falls below that, stop the system. And so for those of you that, does everyone know who Sean Westcott is? He was a student here a couple years ago. Okay. He was back visiting, short guy, bald beard, for the posters on Friday, if you're here during the posters. Anyway, alumni from the program, graduated last year, I think it was. I've lost track. But he's working in the automation field doing controls work, and he's talking about one of his projects, and they've got this system, and they're testing it, and the problem is they're on a little crappy compressor like what we have here. And because as soon as the system starts to process something, it has to open up, it said something like 45 or 25 valves for different air cylinders. And because the system he's using doesn't have the volume, starts it up, compressor's good, it's capped off, the tanks are full, start the conveyor goes, box shows up, all these cylinders fire, and immediately the whole thing shuts down because he's dropped his air pressure below that minimum threshold because the system sucks up too much air doing its job because they're not on house air. If you're pushing the limits of the air capacity, you can have that where it's going, yeah, we got enough, no we don't, yes we do, no we don't, and it may be because you got an air intensive system somewhere, so instead of using an electric motor for things, sometimes people use air motors. Basically, it's the opposite of a fan, right? So I blow air through it, it spins the propeller, that's connected to a shaft that does something. The nice thing about those, generally, is they don't create sparks. So if I'm in a scenario where I'm making ammunition, gunpowder everywhere, you don't want sparks and gunpowder together, right? And so I might be using an air motor to do something. They may create a static charge, which is why I say maybe not, but it's something you have to be aware of. Is there another operation that's doing 25 valves at once and my air pressure keeps dropping just below that threshold and bouncing up and down on it? And so sometimes it's a scenario of, hey, I can ignore the last two digits, or I put in something to do averaging, to smooth, to act as a filter. I don't remember. Not anything on that. Okay, let's do this here real fast. So, from the filter point of view, And I'll zoom it, I'm not gonna zoom it out and zoom back in, I'll just bring it up here and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. I can have software filters, and some of the input modules for Rockwell provide these. So I don't have to build an electronic filter, it's built in already for me. If we ever start the software. There it goes. Nice. Whatever, just go online, please. And so this is the high-speed counter card on MicroLogix for the conveyor. But you notice it shows filters here. And so I can come in and say, hey, I want to use a 20 millisecond filter, or a 700 or a 0.02 millisecond, 0.7 or 7 millisecond filter. And so what it's doing is it's averaging the input signals during those times and trying to smooth them. So that instead of going, we get more of a flat, steady signal coming in. Does that make sense? All right. So obviously, I've got that sensor wired in. Like I said, I'm going to try to get the other one wired in today, and maybe, if I'm lucky, hopefully the color sensor wired in. We'll talk about the groups for the final project then, I guess, at lab today, assuming other people show up. Other questions? All right. I will see you guys at 12:40-ish. Give or take some.